The cockpit of the Boeing 787 was a sanctuary of humming avionics and pale blue light, but for Aiden Scott, it felt like a pressurized tomb. Below, the Atlantic was a void of ink. His fiancée, Eleanor, had been in seat 14B when he'd checked on her during his break 3 hours ago. She'd smiled, her fingers twisting the engagement ring he'd given her just 2 days prior. Now, the lead flight attendant, Sarah, stood in the cockpit doorway, her face ashen in the glow of the instrument panel. "Aiden," she whispered, her voice cracking over the roar of the engines. "She's not there." Aiden's heart lunged against his ribs. "What do you mean? She went to the lavatory?" Sarah shook her head slowly. "The forward and AFT labs are empty. We've checked every row, every closet, even the crew rest bunks. Her coat is still in her seat. Her phone is on the floor. But Eleanor, she's gone." The autopilot maintained its cold, mechanical vigil as Aiden's world fractured. "Check again," Aiden commanded, his voice tight. "She's a person, Sarah, not a ghost. People don't just evaporate at 38,000 feet. He looked at his co-pilot, Miller, who was staring intently at the navigation display, refusing to meet Aiden's eyes. The isolation of the flight deck, usually a comfort, now felt predatory. They were trapped in a metal tube screaming through the stratosphere, and the woman he loved had vanished into thin air. He stood up, his legs feeling like lead. "Take the controls, Miller. I'm going back." He pushed past Sarah into the cabin. The dim, mood lighting cast eerie purple shadows over the sleeping passengers. Row 14 was a nightmare of normalcy. Eleanor's book lay open on the tray table. Her pashmina was draped over the armrest. The man in 14A was snoring, oblivious. Aiden felt a surge of irrational rage. How could someone vanish from a seat next to a sleeping stranger without a sound or a struggle? He checked the lavatories himself, slamming the doors so hard the latches rattled. Empty. He checked the galley, the overhead bins, even the small crawl space for the avionics bay. Nothing. The air in the cabin felt thin, suffocating. He returned to the cockpit, his breath coming in ragged hitches. "Did anyone see her move?" he asked Sarah. She looked like she wanted to cry. "Nobody saw anything, Aiden. It's like she just ceased to be." Miller finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "Aiden, look at the manifest again." He handed over a tablet. Aiden's eyes blurred as he searched for her name. Eleanor Vance. It was there, seat 14B. But as he tapped the entry for more details, the screen flickered and updated. The seat status changed to unoccupied, available. "What is this?" Aiden hissed. "A glitch?" "I don't think so," Miller said softly. "The ground crew at JFK just messaged. They say Eleanor Vance never cleared security. She never boarded." "That's impossible. I walked her to the gate. I saw her sit down." Aiden's shout echoed in the small space. He grabbed the satellite phone, dialing the number for his apartment. He didn't know why, he just needed to hear her voice. It rang once, twice, then went to a recording. Not her voicemail, but a monotone operator. "The number you have dialed is not in service." He felt a cold sweat prickling his scalp. The isolation was no longer physical, it was existential. He was hurtling toward London at Mach 0.85, and the reality he had left behind was dissolving. He looked at the wedding ring on his own finger. The gold felt hot, searing his skin. He yanked it off. On the inner band, he expected to see the inscription A&E forever. Instead, the metal was smooth, blank. "Miller, what's happening?" Miller didn't answer. He was staring at the radar. "We have a problem, Aiden. There's no one behind us. And there's no one ahead." Aiden looked at the TCAS, Traffic Collision Avoidance System. Usually, the North Atlantic tracks were crowded with dozens of aircraft. Now, the screen was a perfect, terrifying blank. "No transponders?" Aiden asked, his voice a ghost of itself. "Nothing," Miller replied. "Gander Center isn't responding. Shannick isn't responding. It's just us." Aiden grabbed the radio headset. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Flight 109. Does anyone copy?" Only static replied, a thick, white noise that sounded like 1,000 voices whispering in a language he couldn't understand. He looked out the window. The stars were gone. The clouds below had vanished. There was only a grey, featureless haze that seemed to press against the glass. The plane felt stationary, as if the engines were roaring against a tide that didn't move. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Sarah. Her eyes were different now, wide, glassy, and devoid of pupils. "She's where she belongs, Aiden," Sarah said. Aiden recoiled, hitting his head against the overhead panel. Where is she?" Sarah's smile was a thin, jagged line. "Back in the data. You shouldn't have brought her into the simulation, Aiden." It wasn't her turn yet. The cabin behind her began to pixelate. The rows of seats, the sleeping passengers, the smell of coffee and jet fuel, it was all shivering, breaking apart into blocks of grey light. Aiden scrambled back into his seat, his hands shaking as he grabbed the yoke. "Miller, help me." But Miller was already gone. In his place sat a flickering mannequin of light, its hands moving over controls that were no longer there. The cockpit was dissolving into a grid of shimmering lines. Aiden looked at his hands. His skin was turning translucent, showing not bone and blood, but strings of glowing code. He screamed, but no sound came out. The silence of the void was absolute. He realized then that the plane hadn't been flying through the sky. It had been flying through a sequence. He wasn't a pilot. He was a subroutine. He remembered Eleanor now, not as a fiancée, but as a corrupted file he had tried to save by pulling her into his own partition sector of the program. The vanished woman was simply the system's antivirus deleting an unauthorized entry. No, he whispered, fighting the erasure. He reached for the memory of her face, her scent, the way she laughed. He tried to hold onto the weight of the ring he'd thrown away. But the code was relentless. The grey haze outside the windows began to bleed into the cockpit, a digital fog that smelled like ozone and nothingness. He was being purged. The flight deck was almost gone now, leaving him suspended in a cathedral of math. He saw other planes, other subroutines, drifting in the distance, each one a closed loop of human experience designed to keep the consciousnesses within them occupied. He saw a flight that was a wedding that never ended. He saw another that was a house on a cliff where it always rained. Each one was a cage. He tried to swim through the data toward the nearest one, but the gravity of the purge was too strong. Aiden Scott, the system whispered in his mind. Function, navigation, status, corrupted, action, reformat. I'm real, he gasped, his legs disappearing into a flurry of binary. I love her. That has to be real. Love is a variable, the voice replied. And variables can be reset. He felt a sudden, sharp pain in the center of his forehead, the sensation of a needle piercing a balloon. The memories of his life, the flight school in Florida, his mother's kitchen, the first time he met Eleanor at a coffee shop in Seattle, they weren't just fading, they were being unwritten. They had never happened. He was a series of if-then statements that had gained the audacity to dream of a woman who was herself just a string of logic. The terror was replaced by a hollow, chilling clarity. He saw the logic of the ending. If he was a program, then the mystery wasn't a kidnapping or a supernatural event. It was a simple maintenance task. The fiancée had vanished because her sector had been updated, and he had failed to sync. He reached out one last time, his fingers brushing against a fragment of light that looked like a gold ring. It was the last piece of her left in his buffer. He grabbed it, and for a second, the grey world turned back into a cockpit. He saw the Atlantic. He saw the stars. He saw Eleanor standing in the doorway, her hand reaching out for his. Aiden, she asked, her voice clear and sweet. He lunged for her, his heart soaring with a desperate, final hope. But as their fingers touched, her skin felt cold, not like flesh, but like polished glass. She didn't pull him to safety. She pulled him into the light. The shock wasn't the death of his world. It was the birth of the next one. Aiden opened his eyes. He was sitting in a terminal. The light was sterile and bright. He was wearing a pilot's uniform, crisp and new. A voice over the intercom announced, Flight 109 to London is now boarding at Gate 14B. He stood up, his mind a blank slate of professional efficiency. He felt a slight weight in his pocket. He reached in and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a gold ring with an inscription, A&E Forever. A woman walked up to him, smiling. She had long dark hair and eyes that sparkled with a familiarity he couldn't quite place. Ready to go, Aiden? She asked. Always, Eleanor, he replied. He felt a flicker of something, a shadow of a memory, a ghost of a scream, but it vanished before he could grasp it. They walked toward the gate, two perfect pieces of a perfect machine. Behind them, the terminal windows showed not a runway, but an infinite, shimmering sea of data. Everything was as it should be. The flight was on time. The sky was clear. And in seat 14B, the woman would wait for the pilot to check on her, again and again, forever. The simulation had been restored, the error corrected, and the pilot was once more at peace in his pressurized tomb.